A faint breeze wandered through the deserted park, gathering the brittle, fallen leaves into small, spiraling dances beneath a sky cloaked in heavy grey clouds that loomed with the promise of rain. Henry, a 3-year-old boy who had been blind since birth, played gently near his mother, seated on a worn wooden bench etched with years of weathering. The park, cradled by a dense, shadowy forest, appeared as a serene sanctuary for a quiet afternoon escape, until, in the blink of an eye, the calm shattered into chaos. Henry's mother, Jennifer, felt her phone buzz insistently in her pocket and pulled it out, her eyes dipping to the screen for just a fleeting handful of seconds. When she raised her gaze again, her son was no longer beside her, his small form swallowed by the vastness around them. Her voice splintered with sudden, raw panic as she called out, "Henry, where are you?" Unbeknownst to her, the little boy, intrigued by a distant, mysterious sound echoing through the trees, had wandered off into the thick woodland, oblivious to the dangers that awaited him there. Alone and vulnerable, he soon sensed the chilling absence of his mother's familiar presence. His tiny heart began to pound fiercely in his chest, and he cried out, "Mom, help!" But the towering trees and thick underbrush muffled his desperate pleas, his voice lost amidst the ceaseless rustling of leaves and the mournful howl of the wind. Disoriented and frightened, he had no sense of where he stood or which path might lead him back. Fear tightened its grip around him like a vice, his outstretched hands grasping blindly for any anchor, any point of familiarity. But all he encountered was the cold, empty air stretching endlessly around him. Just when it seemed that little Henry had been abandoned to the mercy of the wilderness, an unexpected figure emerged from the shadows. A stray dog, its fur rough and matted from a life of hardship, stepped out from behind a scraggly bush, its deep, soulful eyes catching the faint light filtering through the canopy. Though its frame was lean, almost skeletal, there was a quiet strength in its movements, a determination that hinted at something extraordinary beneath its ragged exterior. The dog fixed its steady gaze upon the boy, as though it could feel the weight of his helpless terror. It let out a single bark, low, resonant and unwavering, a sound that cut through the ambient noise of the forest. Henry froze at the sound, his small body tensing. There was something in that bark, not menacing but grounding, as if this mysterious animal had arrived with a purpose, a mission to guide him. The dog edged closer, its cold, wet nose brushing against Henry's trembling, and a strange, inexplicable wave of comfort washed over the boy, easing the frantic beating of his heart. "Who are you?" Henry whispered, his voice barely audible, fragile as a thread. This serendipitous encounter between the lost child and the weathered stray ignited the beginning of something truly remarkable. While Jennifer scoured the park, in a frantic, desperate search for her son, the dog appeared to carry a plan of its own, a silent vow etched into its purposeful strides. Henry's fate, it seemed, now rested in the care of this unlikely guardian, its dirt-streaked paws stepping softly but surely upon the forest floor. Still shaken and bewildered, Henry felt the dog's warm breath tickling his fingers as it lingered near him. Though he couldn't see its tangled coat or the profound depth of its eyes, he sensed a protective energy radiating from the creature, an almost tangible shield against the unknown. The dog emitted a gentle, encouraging whimper, a sound that seemed to beckon him forward, to trust in its lead. Somehow, despite his fear and blindness, Henry understood the invitation woven into that soft noise. "Do you want to help me?" he asked, his voice quivering with a mixture of dread and fragile hope. The dog barked again, this time with a sharper, more decisive tone, as if affirming its intent, and then it began to move, its steps deliberate and slow, pausing every few paces to ensure the boy followed behind. Henry latched onto the slender, thread of faith that this enigmatic animal stirred within him, reaching out with his small hand to follow the faint, reassuring sound of its paws pressing into the earth. Meanwhile, Jennifer roamed the sprawling park, her cries for Henry growing hoarse and jagged with desperation. Her heart churned with a storm of fear and guilt. Each second that ticked by stretched into an unbearable eternity, a torment of uncertainty. A handful of strangers, moved by her distress, had joined her search, their eyes darting across the tree line, but the boy remained a phantom, lost to the shadows of the woods. Abruptly, the dog halted, its lean body stiffening as if carved from stone. A sudden, sharp crack of snapping twigs erupted from the underbrush nearby, shattering the stillness. Henry, unaware of any lurking danger, shuffled forward, but the dog swiftly positioned itself between him and the source of the noise, a low, rumbling growl vibrating deep in its throat. Out of the thick foliage burst a towering deer, its antlers glinting faintly in the dim light, its eyes wide with startled alarm. For a fleeting moment, it stood frozen, staring at them, then bolted back into the depths of the forest, vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. Once the threat had passed, the dog turned back to Henry, its rough tongue brushing his hand in a gesture of reassurance, as if to say, "You're safe with me now." "What was that?" Henry asked, his voice trembling, instinctively knowing. The dog had stood as his protector. The animal offered no reply beyond a gentle nudge with its nose, urging him onward along a safer path. Back in the park, one of the searchers caught sight of faint, child-sized footprints pressed into the damp, mossy soil. Jennifer seized upon that fragile lifeline, her heart leaping as she began to trace the trail with a desperate, unwavering resolve. "Henry, are you there?" she cried out, her voice breaking under the weight of her anguish. The dog's ears twitched at the sound of her call. It stopped in its tracks and let loose a loud, piercing bark, a beacon that sliced through the tangled woods, a response meant for her ears alone. "Mom!" Henry shouted, his spirit lifting as he recognized the familiar timbre of her voice cutting through the distance. Yet the danger had not fully receded. A narrow stream, its waters swollen and turbulent from recent rains, carved a treacherous divide between Henry and his mother. The boy, standing too close to the slippery edge, remained oblivious to the steep drop just inches away. The dog, however, sensed it immediately. With a flurry of urgent barks, it darted in front of him, pressing its wiry body against his legs, nudging him back from the perilous brink with a gentle but insistent force. Jennifer, guided by the sound of the dog's fierce cries, broke through the curtain of trees just in time to witness the stray, carefully maneuvering Henry away from the muddy, crumbling edge. Tears carved glistening trails down her cheeks as she sprinted to her son, enveloping him in a fierce, trembling embrace, her entire frame shaking with the aftershocks of terror and relief. "Thank God, Henry, you're safe," she sobbed, her voice thick with emotion. Then she turned her gaze to the dog, which stood nearby, observing them with an almost serene composure. Kneeling beside Henry, she extended a trembling hand toward the stray. "Thank you. I don't know who you are or where you came from, but you saved my child." The dog met her eyes, its tail giving a faint tentative wag, though it maintained a quiet, reserved distance, as if it understood that its role in this unfolding story had not yet reached its end. Jennifer, still crouched beside her son, stared at the dog in a mixture of disbelief and gratitude, marveling at the improbable savior that had emerged from the wild. There was something undeniably extraordinary about this stray. It carried itself not as a mere animal wandering aimlessly, but as a deliberate guardian, a protector sent specifically to watch over her son. As she murmured soothing words to Henry, the dog's ears snapped upright, and it leapt to its feet with sudden alertness. A rustling stirred the underbrush just ahead, a sound that prickled the hairs on Jennifer's neck. She stiffened, her maternal instincts surging to the forefront. "What is it?" she whispered, clutching Henry tighter against her chest. The dog positioned itself in front of them, its lean frame taut as a drawn bowstring, every muscle coiled with readiness. Then it barked, a deep, commanding sound that echoed through the trees, resonating with authority. Jennifer, her heart pounding with both fear and determination, scooped Henry into her arms and began to follow the dog, which seemed resolute in its intent to lead them away from whatever threat loomed nearby. As they navigated the winding forest paths, she began to hear the unmistakable rhythm of footsteps trailing behind, soft, deliberate, and unnervingly close. She whipped her head around, peering into the dense thicket, but saw only flickering shadows dancing between the trees. The dog, however, growled softly, its stance unwavering, a shield of fur and grit between them and the unknown. "We need to get out of here quickly," she whispered to herself, picking up her pace, her breath hitching with every step. Suddenly, a figure stepped from the gloom, a man broad-shouldered with a rifle slung casually over his shoulder. "Is everything all right, ma'am?" he asked, his tone carrying an ambiguous edge that set her nerves alight. Jennifer faltered, her fear spiking. "Yes, we're just trying to leave the park," she replied, her voice unsteady, laced with suspicion. The hunter's eyes drifted to the dog, narrowing slightly. "Is that your dog?" he asked, his curiosity tinged with something sharper, more probing. Jennifer hesitated, weighing her words. "No, but it saved my son." The hunter offered a faint smile, but it held no warmth, only a calculating glint. "Strange to find a dog like that out here. It could be useful, valuable even." The dog sensed the shift in his demeanor, stepping forward to place itself squarely between Jennifer and Henry and the man, its growl rising into a fierce, protective snarl. The hunter recoiled, visibly startled by the animal's sudden aggression. "I didn't mean any harm," he said quickly, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. But Jennifer didn't trust the sincerity in his voice or the look in his eyes. The dog pressed them onward, its movements urgent, guiding them toward the edge of the woods with a steadfast determination she couldn't ignore. With each step, Jennifer felt a growing sense of security in following this resolute creature, its presence a lifeline in the uncertainty. Henry, now resting calmly in her arms, murmured softly, "Mom, he's an angel." His innocent words sank deep into her soul, stirring a quiet wonder. How could an abandoned animal display such courage, such uncanny intelligence? Minutes later, they emerged onto a broader, open path, where the distant glow of light signaled the park's exit, a beacon of safety drawing nearer. Jennifer knelt beside the dog, her breath still uneven from the ordeal. "I don't know who you are or where you came from, but we owe you everything. Thank you." The dog barked gently, its tail swaying ever so slightly in response. Just as Jennifer began to believe their harrowing adventure had reached its end, Henry stretched out his small hands toward the dog, his fingers brushing its muzzle. The boy let out a clear, joyous laugh, a sound that sliced through the tension of the afternoon like a ray of sunlight. "Can I keep him, Mom? He's my angel." Jennifer paused, her heart caught in a moment of indecision. But deep within, she already knew the answer. This dog was no mere stray. It had woven itself into the fabric of their lives, a part of their family born from this extraordinary day. As they stepped out of the forest's embrace, Jennifer, Henry, and the dog found themselves on the main road leading to the park's parking lot. The soft light of the setting sun bathed the path in a warm, golden hue, offering a fleeting sense of relief that soothed her frayed nerves. But that tranquility proved short-lived. The dog suddenly froze, its ears pricking up sharply, and it began barking toward the opposite side of the road, its body rigid as if carved from stone. Jennifer, who had just begun to let her guard down, felt a cold shiver ripple down her spine. "What's going on, friend?" she whispered, her eyes following the dog's intense stare. From behind a thick bush emerged the same hunter they'd encountered earlier, his face now drawn with a different, more guarded expression. He had set aside his rifle, but in his hand he held a small flashlight, its beam trained directly on them, cutting through the fading daylight. "Mom, I didn't mean to scare you earlier," he said, his voice calm but threaded with an undercurrent of tension that set her on edge. "That dog, does it belong to someone?" Jennifer stood upright, her grip tightening on Henry's hand. "I don't know. It saved my son," she replied, her tone firm despite the unease creeping through her. The hunter took a cautious step. Closer, his eyes locked on the dog with a scrutiny that felt too keen. "This isn't your average stray. I've never seen one like it around these parts. It looks trained, maybe escaped from somewhere special, a place that might be looking for it." Jennifer's heart sank, a wave of doubt crashing over her. What if this dog wasn't truly a stray? What if it had a family or a purpose beyond them, someone out there searching for it just as she had searched for Henry before she could muster a response? The dog growled again, low and menacing, positioning itself as a steadfast barrier between her and the man. The hunter halted, raising his hands in a placating gesture. All right, I don't mean any harm," he said, his smile faltering, uncertain under the weight of the dog's fierce glare. Jennifer felt her tension ease slightly, but his next word sent a fresh chill coursing through her veins. "You know, a few months back, a truck carrying animals was involved in a wreck not far from here. Some of those dogs got loose, and they say one of them was special, trained for rescue missions, a real standout." Jennifer's pulse quickened, her mind racing with the implications of his claim. Could it be true? Was this dog truly a hero escaped from such an accident? She studied the animal standing beside her, now calm but ever vigilant, its presence a steady anchor in the storm of her thoughts, and she began to wonder about the life it might have led before crossing their path. "How do you know that?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. The hunter shrugged, his casual demeanor at odds with the gravity of his words. "I work with a rescue team around here. I didn't mean to unsettle you, ma'am, but when I saw that dog, well, it struck me as familiar, too familiar to be just a coincidence." Jennifer's thoughts spun in a chaotic whirl, unsure of what to believe, but Henry remained steadfast, his childlike certainty unshaken. "He didn't escape, Mom. He's here for us. He's my angel," he insisted, his voice small but resolute. As they stood there, caught in this moment of uncertainty, a car approached slowly down the road, its headlights casting a soft glow across the scene. Jennifer noticed the driver inside, a man who seemed to be searching for something, or someone, with an intent focus. The dog turned toward the vehicle and barked loudly, a sharp, commanding sound that reverberated through the evening air. The car rolled to a stop beside them, and the driver lowered his window, his face lighting up with recognition. "That's Milo!" he exclaimed, his voice brimming with astonishment. Jennifer blinked, confusion knitting her brow. "Milo? You know him?" she asked, her tone laced with surprise. "Yes, he's the dog I lost during that accident the hunter just mentioned, a trained rescue dog. We've been scouring the area for him ever since he vanished," the man explained, his eyes fixed on the dog with a mixture of relief and longing. The dog stepped toward the car, its gaze meeting the man's with a quiet attentiveness. But instead of bounding forward in joyful reunion, it turned back and stationed itself beside Henry, as if unwilling to abandon the boy. The man climbed out of the car and knelt before the dog, his voice soft and pleading. "Milo, it's me. Come home." The dog looked at him, its eyes flickering with something like recognition, but it remained firmly by Henry's side, unwavering in its choice. Jennifer felt her heart twist painfully in her chest. If this man was truly the dog's owner, he had every right to reclaim him. Yet the bond that had blossomed between Milo and Henry in those perilous hours was undeniable, a connection forged in crisis that she couldn't ignore. "I don't know," she said, her voice faltering as she glanced at the dog. "He saved my son. Maybe he's here for a reason. Maybe he's meant to be with us now." The parking lot, now bathed in the deepening hues of twilight, transformed into the stage for an emotional confrontation. Jennifer, the man who claimed to be Milo's owner, and the hunter stood in a tense, silent tableau, while the dog remained steadfastly by Henry's side, as though it had already decided where it belonged. Henry, with the unblemished innocence of a child, reached out a small hand toward Milo and said, "You'll stay with me, right? Don't go away." Jennifer watched the scene unfold, her heart heavy with conflicting emotions. She couldn't dismiss the profound connection Milo had formed with her son, a tie that seemed to transcend words or ownership. Yet the man before her appeared genuinely attached to the dog, his eyes reflecting a quiet sorrow that tugged at her empathy. "I don't want to cause any problems," the man said, his tone softening with a hint of resignation. "Milo is a trained dog, and he's always been special to me, exceptional really. If he's chosen to stay with your son, there's a reason behind it. But I need you to know he's not just a stray. He's been with me for years, and I've been searching desperately for him since he disappeared in that crash." Jennifer, it felt torn, her mind a battlefield of loyalty and compassion. The dog, too, seemed caught in a moment of indecision, its gaze shifting between the man and Henry. For a brief instant, it stepped toward the man, sniffing his outstretched hand and letting out a soft, tentative bark, perhaps a flicker of memory, an acknowledgement of their past. But then, just as quickly, it returned to Henry's side, sitting close to the boy as if to declare, "This is where I belong now." The hunter, who had remained silent until that moment, offered a thoughtful observation. "You know, animals have a special kind of instinct, something we humans can't always fathom. Milo has chosen to stay with this boy, and maybe that's because he senses he's needed here, right now. But it's also true that if he's really a trained rescue dog, he could go on to help so many others out there." His words landed heavily on Jennifer's shoulders, resonating with a truth she couldn't ignore. She knelt beside Milo, her hand resting gently on his head as she stroked his coarse fur. "You're really a hero, aren't you?" she murmured, her voice thick with emotion. "But I don't know what the right thing to do is for you." Henry interrupted her reverie, wrapping his small arms around Milo in a fierce hug. "Mom, he doesn't want to leave. He saved me. He's my friend," he said, his voice trembling with conviction. The man, witnessing Henry's raw emotion and the unmistakable bond between the boy and the dog, took a step back, his expression softening further. "Maybe we can find a solution," he said, turning his gaze to Jennifer with a quiet resolve. "I could leave him with you for a while and come back to visit him from time to time. It's clear that right now he feels his place is here with you and your son." Jennifer was taken aback by the generosity of his offer. A wave of relief, washing over her like a balm. "That would be wonderful," she replied, her voice steadying as gratitude swelled within her. "I don't want to take something so precious from you, but this dog, he's done so much for us today, more than I can ever repay. We can't just let him go." The man nodded slowly, his eyes lingering on Milo with a bittersweet fondness. "Milo has always been an extraordinary animal, unlike any other I've known. If he's chosen you and your son, there's a reason for it, a purpose I can't argue with, but I'd just like to be able to see him again, to know he's all right." In the minutes that followed, while the hunter stepped away to give them Space. Henry and Milo began to play together in the parking lot. The child's laughter rang out clear and bright, his small hands stroking the dog's fur with a tenderness that erased the day's earlier fears. Jennifer watched them, a blend of joy and newfound peace settling over her like a warm blanket. Milo wasn't merely a savior who had pulled them from the brink. He seemed to have brought a sense of hope and protection into their lives, a gift she hadn't anticipated. Maybe he's truly meant for us, she thought to herself, her mind drifting to the possibility of a deeper connection. The man approached her once more, this time with a more relaxed, serene smile playing on his lips. "I'll leave you my number," he said, pulling a scrap of paper from his pocket and scribbling on it. "If you ever need help with him, anything at all, just call me, but promise me you'll take care of him like he deserves, like the special soul he is." Jennifer nodded earnestly, taking the paper with a grateful nod. "You can count on it," she assured him. "We'll do everything we can to give him the life he's earned." In the days that followed that incredible meeting, Jennifer and Henry welcomed Milo into their daily lives with open arms. The dog adapted swiftly, revealing not only a deep well of affection, but also an astonishing intelligence that left them in awe. However, not everything unfolded as smoothly as they might have hoped. One evening, as Jennifer was tucking Henry into bed, Milo began to act strangely, pacing restlessly back and forth in front of the living room window, his barks sharp and insistent as he stared out into the enveloping darkness. Jennifer pulled back the curtains to investigate, her brow furrowing, but the night beyond revealed nothing. No movement, no threat, just an empty void. "What's wrong, Milo?" She asked softly, running her hand along his back to calm him. Milo stopped barking but remained still, his gaze fixed on some unseen point in the blackness, as though he could perceive something beyond her human senses. Despite a flicker of unease, she decided to chalk it up to the dog's nerves, a lingering echo of their ordeal, and let it pass. But the next morning, as she walked Henry to daycare, Jennifer noticed a man lingering at a distance behind them, a figure with a furtive air, his movements too careful, too deliberate to be coincidence. He tried to blend into the surroundings, avoiding her gaze, but Milo detected him instantly. The dog positioned itself between the stranger and Jennifer, its growl rising into a fierce protective rumble that reverberated through the quiet street. "Is everything okay?" Jennifer asked the man, striving to keep her voice calm and steady despite the alarm bells ringing in her mind. The man raised his hands in a gesture of innocence, a thin smile tugging at his lips. "Oh, excuse me. Ma'am, I just noticed that dog. He looks like one I've been searching for," he said, his tone casual, but his eyes sharp with intent. Jennifer narrowed her gaze, her grip tightening on Henry's hand as suspicion coiled within her. "I don't know what you're talking about, but this dog is with us now," she replied firmly, her words edged with defiance. The man nodded, his smile turning enigmatic, almost mocking, before he turned and walked away, his figure receding into the morning haze. Milo kept his eyes locked on the stranger until he vanished completely from sight, his posture rigid with vigilance. Jennifer couldn't shake the unease that had burrowed into her chest, a gnawing sense that something wasn't right. That evening, she decided to call the man who had claimed to be Milo's owner, recounting the unsettling encounter and Milo's unusual behavior the night before. "Do you think someone's trying to take him back?" she asked, her voice laced with worry. "I'm not sure," he replied, his tone growing taut with concern, "but it's possible. Milo isn't an ordinary dog, he's special, and if someone knows how exceptional he is, they might want him for reasons that aren't good, reasons that could put him in danger." Jennifer felt a shudder ripple through her at the thought. Milo, who had become a part of their family, targeted for some nefarious purpose she couldn't fathom. "I'll keep an eye out," she said with resolve. "I won't let anyone take him away from us." Meanwhile, the hunter they had met in the park reached out again, having heard her story through a mutual connection. Upon learning of the situation, he offered his assistance with a seriousness that matched her growing concern. "I know how to track suspicious people," he told her over the phone, his voice steady and grave. "If that man is trying to steal the dog, we can find out who he is and what he's after." Jennifer hesitated, unsure whether to place her full trust in him, but she noticed something telling. Milo seemed to relax in the hunter's presence when he arrived later, a rare sign of acceptance from the wary dog. That observation tipped the scales, and she agreed to let him help, hoping his skills could shed light on the threat. That same night, Jennifer was jolted awake by a noise outside the front door, a faint metallic scrape that set her nerves. On edge, Milo was already there, standing rigid in front of the entrance, his growl low and menacing, a warning to whatever lurked beyond. Heart pounding, she crept to the door and peered through the peephole, catching a glimpse of a shadowy figure fumbling with the lock, their movements furtive and deliberate. "Who's there?" she shouted, forcing her voice to remain strong despite the fear clawing at her throat. The figure froze for a heartbeat, then darted away into the darkness, disappearing as swiftly as a phantom. Milo barked furiously, his claws scratching at the door as if eager to give chase. Jennifer grabbed her phone and dialed the hunter, her, words tumbling out in a breathless rush as she recounted what had happened. "This is serious," he replied, his tone clipped and urgent. "You need to file a report with the police and set up security cameras around the house. It'll help. You protect Milo and yourselves." Jennifer nodded to herself, her fear hardening into determination. She wouldn't let anyone endanger her family or the dog who had saved her son, not after all they'd been through together. Despite the mounting tension, Milo grew even more protective, his presence a constant shield around Henry, who seemed to find an endless well of comfort in the dog's steadfast companionship. "Milo is my hero," Henry would say often, his small hands petting the dog's rough fur with a gentle reverence that melted Jennifer's heart. The next morning, a lingering sense of unease shadowed her as she went about her routine. She couldn't shake the events of the previous night, the image of that shadowy figure etched into her mind. Glancing out the kitchen window as she prepared breakfast, she saw Milo sitting on the front lawn, his gaze fixed unblinkingly on the edge of their garden, his posture one of unrelenting vigilance, as if he were waiting for something, or someone, to emerge. Just as she set a plate of toast on the table, a familiar car pulled up in front of the house. It was the hunter, stepping out with a serious expression, carrying a sheaf of documents in one hand and an electronic device tucked under his arm. "I've done some research," he announced as he entered, his steps purposeful, his voice low and deliberate. "And I think there are more people involved in this than we realized, more than just that one man you saw." Jennifer looked at him with wide eyes, concern tightening her chest. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The hunter explained that he'd traced suspicious activities in the area, linking the stranger from the park to an underground organization that sought to recover trained animals for illegal profit. Milo, with his extraordinary abilities and evident training, was likely a prime target on their list, a prize they were desperate to reclaim. "They must have caught wind of that truck accident months ago," he continued, his brow furrowed. "And now they're scouring the region for him, willing to do whatever it takes." Jennifer felt a cold dread settle over her, freezing her in place. "What can we do to protect him?" she asked, her voice trembling with the weight of her fear. "First of all, I've installed security cameras around your house," the hunter replied, holding up the device he'd brought, a sleek, modern gadget designed for surveillance. And we need to keep a close watch on Milo at all times. Never leave him alone, not even for a moment. He's too valuable to them and too precious to you." That evening, after putting Henry to bed, Jennifer sat on the couch with Milo resting. Beside her, his warm, solid presence a comfort against the storm of her thoughts. She stroked his fur slowly, her mind lost in a tangle of worry and reflection. She had grown so attached to him, and seeing how fiercely he protected Henry filled her with a sense of security she hadn't known in years. A fragile peace now threatened by forces she couldn't fully comprehend. But with this new danger emerging, she began to question whether she was doing the right thing by keeping him with them. Milo deserved a life free from pursuit, a chance to rest without the shadow of danger hanging over him. And perhaps staying with her and Henry wasn't the safest path for him after all. "What should I do, Milo?" she murmured, gazing into his deep, trusting eyes, searching for an answer she knew he couldn't give. The dog responded by laying his head gently on her lap, a quiet gesture that seemed to whisper, "I'm here for you, no matter what." The weight of his loyalty pressed against her, both a comfort and a burden she couldn't ignore. The following day, the man who had claimed to be Milo's original owner arrived for a visit, bringing with him a folder of documents that confirmed Milo's remarkable history. "These papers prove it," he said, spreading them out on the kitchen table for Jennifer to see. Milo was trained as a rescue dog for an international team, top of his class, exceptional in every way. He's been in emergencies, saved lives, and he's one of the best we've ever had. But if you want to keep him, I won't stand in your way. It seems he's found a new mission with you and your son." Jennifer sat in silence for a long moment, her heart torn between two truths. On one hand, she understood Milo's incredible gift, his potential to save countless others with his skills. On the other, the bond he'd forged with Henry was unbreakable, a lifeline that had pulled them through their darkest hour. "I need to think about it," she said finally, her voice heavy with the weight of the decision looming before her. That night, as she settled into an uneasy rest, the security cameras installed by the hunter picked up movement outside, a subtle shift in the shadows that triggered a discreet alarm, jolting her awake. She leapt from the couch, her pulse racing, and saw Milo already stationed in front of the door, his posture alert and ready. Peering at the footage on her phone, she caught sight of two men creeping toward the house, their flashlights cutting through the dark, their intent unmistakable. One of them was the same stranger she'd seen in the park, the one who'd eyed Milo with that unsettling curiosity. Her breath caught in her throat as she dialed the hunter and the man who claimed Milo, her fingers trembling against the screen. Both arrived swiftly, their headlights piercing the night as they pulled into the driveway, and the two suspicious figures fled before they could be confronted, vanishing into the shadows like wraiths. The next morning, Jennifer sat Henry down, her voice gentle but firm as she explained the gravity of the situation. "Some people want to take Milo away from us, sweetheart," she said, watching his face crumple with distress. "But they can't," Henry protested, tears welling in his eyes as he clutched at her sleeve. "Milo is my friend. He belongs with us." Jennifer pulled him into a tight hug, her own heart aching. "I know, baby. We'll do everything we can to keep him safe, but it might mean letting him go for a little while, just to make sure no one can hurt him. Or us." Milo sat nearby, watching the exchange with those soulful eyes. And when Henry reached out, the dog licked his hand tenderly, as if he understood every word and wanted to ease the boy's pain. The next night felt different, charged with an eerie stillness that set Jennifer's nerves on edge. Milo seemed more vigilant than ever, his eyes darting to the windows, his ears twitching at every sound. Sitting beside him on the couch, Jennifer couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen, a premonition that hung heavy in the air. The silence outside was unnatural, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves stirred by the wind, a quiet that felt like the calm before a storm. Around midnight, a distinct sound snapped her to attention, a sharp crack of a branch breaking near the side of the house. Milo sprang to his feet, his bark fierce and unrelenting as he raced toward the door, his fur bristling with alarm. Jennifer grabbed her phone and checked the security cameras, her heart hammering as she saw 3 figures moving stealthily toward the back of the house. One of them carried a crowbar, its metal glinting faintly in the moonlight, a clear sign of their intent. Her hands shook as she dialed the hunter, her voice a hushed, frantic whisper. "They're trying to break in," she said, barely able to keep the tremor from her words. "Keep the door locked and stay calm. I'm on my way," the hunter replied, his tone sharp and decisive, a soldier ready for battle. Jennifer scooped Henry from his bed and hurried him to an inner room, locking the door behind them. "Don't be afraid, sweetheart," she whispered, pulling him close as his wide eyes searched her face. "Milo will protect us. He always does." Out in the house, Milo had taken up position in front of the back door, his fur standing on end, his teeth bared in a snarl that promised no mercy. The metallic scrape of the crowbar against the lock echoed through the walls, a chilling sound that made Jennifer's stomach lurch. Milo didn't hesitate. With a powerful leap, he threw himself against the door, his barks a thunderous warning that rattled the intruders. The noise seemed to startle them, but they pressed on, determined. When they finally forced the door open, splintering the wood with a loud crack, Milo lunged at the first man, knocking him to the floor with a deep guttural growl that reverberated through the house. The other 2 stumbled back, caught off guard by the dog's ferocity, their confidence wavering in the face of his relentless defense. Just as the situation teetered on the edge of chaos, the faint wail of sirens pierced the night air, growing louder with each passing second. The hunter arrived moments later, flanked by local police who had been alerted during his frantic drive over. The intruders scrambled to flee, their footsteps pounding against the ground, but they were quickly cornered and apprehended. Their escape cut short by the swift response. Jennifer watched from the window of the inner room, clutching Henry tightly in her arms, her breath ragged as she saw Milo standing firm at the threshold, a sentinel refusing to yield. "It's incredible," one of the officers said to the hunter as they secured the scene, shaking his head in disbelief. "This dog practically stopped the attack single-handedly. He's something else." After the intruders were hauled away, the police searched their belongings, uncovering a stash of compromising documents tucked into their backpacks. The papers contained detailed information about Milo, his training, his history, his value, and a chilling revelation. They had been hired by an international animal trafficking ring intent on reclaiming him to sell to the highest bidder for unethical purposes. One of the men, under pressure, confessed with a sneer, "This dog is worth millions. We won't stop until he's ours. They'll keep sending more." Jennifer's stomach churned with revulsion at the thought. Milo, reduced to a commodity in their eyes, when to her he was family, a hero beyond price. "It doesn't matter what they say," she declared, her voice steady with defiance as she met the hunter's gaze. "Milo is part of us now. No one's taking him." But the hunter's expression remained grim, his eyes shadowed with concern as he pulled her aside. "The threat isn't completely gone," he warned, his voice low and serious. "If this is an international organization, they might try again. They've got resources and reach we can't underestimate." Jennifer nodded, the weight of his words sinking in, but the thought of losing Milo or putting Henry at further risk filled her with a quiet terror she couldn't shake. In the days that followed, her home became a fortress under protection, with additional cameras installed around the perimeter and an advanced alarm system wired into every entrance. Milo continued to stand watch over them, his presence a constant comfort. But he also showed a softer side, curling up beside Henry. At night, his gentle affection a balm for the boy's lingering fears. One evening, as Henry petted Milo before drifting off to sleep, he looked up at Jennifer with those wide, earnest eyes and said, "Mom, Milo isn't just a dog. He's our angel." Jennifer smiled, brushing away a tear that slipped down her cheek. "Yes, sweetheart," she replied, her voice thick with love. "That's exactly what he is, a gift we'll never let go of." In the wake of the attack, Jennifer worked tirelessly to restore a sense of normalcy to their lives, though the atmosphere in their home had shifted irrevocably. The police reassured her that the captured intruders were behind bars, their statements leading to further arrests, but the hunter kept returning with the same cautionary refrain. The danger wasn't entirely extinguished, not while the organization remained active. Milo seemed to feel it too, his vigilance unwavering as he shadowed Jennifer's every move and kept Henry under his protective gaze at all times. One evening, as she tucked Henry into bed, the boy's voice broke through her, thoughts with a question that caught her off guard. "Mom, do you think Milo chose to stay with us because he knows we need him?" he asked, his small hand resting on the dog's head. Jennifer paused, her eyes softening as she looked at her son. "Yes, sweetheart," she said after a moment, her voice gentle but certain. "I believe Milo came to us for a special reason, to protect us, to give us strength, to be our light when things get dark." Henry smiled, a sleepy, contented grin, and ran his fingers through Milo's fur. "Then we must never let him go," he murmured, his words fading as his eyes fluttered shut. Those simple words weighed heavily on Jennifer's heart, echoing her own unspoken resolve. She had begun to wonder if keeping Milo was truly the best choice, not for her or Henry, but for him. It was clear he was bonded to them, a part of their very souls, but his presence seemed to draw danger like a magnet, a beacon for those who sought to exploit him. One crisp morning, as she walked Henry to the park for some fresh air, Jennifer noticed a man sitting on a bench, his gaze fixed on them with an intensity that prickled her skin. He was a new face, different from the intruders she'd encountered before, his demeanor polished, yet somehow unsettling. Milo, usually calm in open spaces, began to growl softly, his body tensing beside her. Jennifer approached cautiously, keeping Henry close to her side. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone firm, masking the unease bubbling within her. The man looked up, offering a disarming smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Sorry, I didn't mean to alarm you. My name's David, and I'm a dog trainer. I've heard about Milo and his story. Remarkable, really. May I come closer?" Jennifer hesitated, her instincts warring with her curiosity, but Milo's reaction surprised her. He didn't bristle or snap, merely watched the man with a cautious interest. She nodded slowly, her eyes tracking his every move as he approached. David knelt before Milo, meeting the dog's gaze with a respectful nod. "He's incredible," he said, his hand hovering until Milo allowed a gentle pat. "This dog has something special. Rare, even among trained animals. The bond he's built with your family, it's extraordinary." Jennifer felt a flicker of relief, but kept her guard up. "Why are you here?" she pressed, needing more than kind words. David straightened, his expression earnest. "The hunter reached out to me. He thought I could help. I know you're worried about Milo's safety and your family's too. I'm here to offer support, maybe even dig into his past to understand what we're dealing with." That evening, David spent time with Milo, observing his behavior, testing his responses with a quiet expertise. After an hour, he turned to Jennifer with a revelation that left her speechless. "Milo isn't just a rescue dog," he said, his voice low with awe. "He was trained for high-stakes missions, likely search and rescue in conflict zones. He's exceptional, and that's why he's drawing so much attention, why they won't let him go." Jennifer absorbed his words, a mix of pride and dread swelling within her. "What does this mean for us?" she asked, her voice barely steady. David sat beside her, his tone measured. "It means you need to be ready. Milo is a target for those who'd exploit him, but it also means he's more than capable of protecting your family. He's built for it." Meanwhile, the bond between Milo and Henry only deepened. One evening, as they played in the garden, Henry tripped and fell, scraping his knee. Before Jennifer could rush over, Milo was there, licking the boy's face with a tenderness that brought a laugh bubbling from Henry's throat. "It's okay, Mom," he said, grinning through the sting. "Milo always protects me." Jennifer watched, her heart swelling with the realization that Milo wasn't just a guardian. He was Henry's truest friend, a constant in a world that had grown unpredictable. Despite a stretch of apparent calm, the hunter received troubling news. A faction tied to the trafficking ring was still actively hunting Milo, their determination undeterred by the arrests. "We can't let our guard down," he warned Jennifer, over the phone, his voice tight with urgency. "We need to be prepared for anything they might throw at us." With David, the hunter, and Milo's original owner rallying around her, Jennifer began to devise additional security measures, fortifying their home further. She knew she'd never allow anyone to tear Milo away, but she also had to balance his safety with that of her family, a delicate tightrope she walked with every step. Days passed in a fragile peace, but Jennifer sensed its brittleness, a quiet, before an inevitable storm. Milo remained ever watchful, his eyes scanning the windows, his ears attuned to every creak, while Henry continued to proclaim his four-legged friend's greatness with a child's unshakable faith. One evening, as Jennifer read Henry a bedtime story, Milo suddenly growled, his head snapping toward the window, his eyes piercing the darkness beyond. Jennifer rose, her heart racing, and peered out, catching the faint flicker of shadows moving stealthily toward the house. A sight that sent ice through her veins. She dashed to the phone to call the hunter, but Milo was already in motion, barking furiously as he bolted toward the front door. A loud crash shattered the quiet. The living room window splintered inward, and two men slipped inside, their movements swift and practiced. Milo charged at the first intruder, knocking him to the ground with a force that belied his lean frame, his growl a thunderous warning that filled the room. The second man swung an improvised weapon, a heavy stick, but Milo dodged with uncanny agility, his barks ringing out to alert anyone who might hear. Jennifer, her hands trembling, ushered Henry back to the inner room, locking them inside once more. "Stay here, sweetheart. Don't come out," she whispered, her voice a fragile shield against the panic surging within her. From her hiding spot, she watched Milo hold his ground in the living room, facing down the intruders with a courage that seemed boundless. Despite their numbers, the dog refused to yield, lunging and snapping whenever they tried to advance, keeping them at bay with sheer tenacity. Then a third figure appeared in the doorway, this one armed with a handgun, its barrel glinting ominously in the dim light. Milo paused, his eyes narrowing as he assessed the new threat, his body poised for action. The man raised the weapon, aiming it squarely at Milo, but just as his finger tightened on the trigger, headlights flooded the room. The hunter and police bursting onto the scene. The intruders faltered, caught off guard by the sudden arrival, and attempted to flee, their footsteps pounding in a frantic retreat. But the hunter blocked their path, his voice a commanding shout, "Stop! You're not going anywhere!" The police swarmed in moments later, cuffing the men and dragging them away, ending the assault with a swift, decisive blow. Milo, though, visibly weary, stationed himself beside the hunter, his gaze steady as he ensured the danger had passed. An officer approached Jennifer as she emerged from the inner room with Henry, his tone reassuring. "It's over now. We've got them." Jennifer, tears streaming down her face, stepped into the living room and dropped to her knees beside Milo, pulling him into a tight embrace. "You saved our family again," she whispered, her voice breaking as she buried her face in his fur, gratitude overwhelming her. The hunter joined her, holding up one of the documents seized from the intruders, a detailed dossier on Milo's training and worth. "We've finally dismantled the entire network," he said, a note of triumph in his voice. "Milo played a key role in this. Those men won't be a threat anymore, not to him or anyone else." Jennifer nodded, relief mingling with a profound swell of emotion as she looked at Milo, now lying on the floor, his breathing heavy, but his expression one of quiet satisfaction, a warrior at rest. In the days that followed, Milo's story rippled through their small community, a tale of bravery that captured hearts far and wide. Neighbors gathered to celebrate the dog's heroism, organizing a modest ceremony in his honor at the local park. Henry, beaming with pride, held up a drawing. He'd made of Milo, a stick figure boy, and a shaggy dog crowned with a halo, labeled "My Hero." "Milo is the best dog in the world," he declared to the crowd, his voice ringing with joy, earning a warm round of applause that echoed through the trees. Jennifer felt a wave of gratitude wash over her as she watched, her eyes misty with emotion. This extraordinary dog had entered their lives so unexpectedly, bringing with him not just protection, but a strength and love she'd never imagined possible. With the threat finally extinguished, Jennifer and Henry began to rebuild their sense of normalcy, the scars of their ordeal softening under Milo's steadfast presence. Though he remained vigilant by nature, Milo seemed to relax at last, as if he too understood that the danger had passed, that he was safe in the home he'd chosen. One evening, as they sat in the garden watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, Jennifer ran her hand along Milo's back and said, "You're more than a dog to us, Milo. You're family, our heart." Henry joined her, wrapping his arms around Milo's neck. "And I'll always be your best friend," he added, his smile bright as the fading light. Milo's tale of a stray-turned savior became a symbol of their resilience, a testament to the power of love and courage against all odds. Milo's story didn't end there. It grew into an inspiration for their town and beyond. Jennifer decided to share their journey at a local event focused on animal welfare, standing before a small crowd with Henry and Milo by her side. "Every animal has a value beyond measure," she told them, her voice steady with conviction. "Milo didn't just save our lives. He taught us what it means to love without limits, to stand up when everything seems lost." As months turned to seasons, Jennifer, Henry, and Milo built a life rich with happy memories, facing the future with a hope forged in their shared trials. Milo remained Henry's constant shadow, guarding him, playing with him, a friend who never wavered. One quiet evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Henry hugged Milo tightly and said, "Thank you for being my best friend. I love you, Milo." Jennifer, watching this tender moment, felt her heart brim with gratitude. They'd faced darkness together and emerged stronger, bound by a dog who was more than a pet, a living emblem of their unbreakable family. If this story stirred your soul, leave a comment below. Could an animal like Milo change your life forever? Subscribe for more tales that tug at the heart. Hit that like button to support our journey. And remember, love and bravery often hide in the most unexpected places. Thank you for walking with us through Milo's incredible story.